In 1994, something dangerous was hidden in a suburban neighborhood. Inside a backyard shed in Michigan, radiation levels had reached 1,000 times normal. The EPA was about to declare an emergency, but this wasn't a nuclear facility. It was a teenager's science project. David Hahn was 17 years old, brilliant, curious, and obsessed with nuclear physics. For years he had been collecting radioactive materials, smoke detectors, lantern mantles, anything he could find. His goal? To build a breeder reactor in his backyard. And he almost succeeded. This is the story of how a Boy Scouts merit badge project became a nuclear disaster. And it raises a troubling question. How easy is it to build a nuclear reactor? And who's making sure it doesn't happen again? David Hahn grew up in Clinton Township, Michigan, a quiet suburb north of Detroit. Nothing about his childhood suggested what was coming. But from an early age, David was fascinated by chemistry. His father bought him a chemistry set when he was 10. It wouldn't be enough. By age 14, David had converted his bedroom into a makeshift laboratory. He conducted experiments, synthesized compounds, and nearly blew up the house multiple times. His parents grew concerned. They banned chemistry from the house. So David moved his operation to his mother's backyard shed. And that's when his interests shifted, from chemistry to something far more dangerous. In the early 1990s, David joined the Boy Scouts. He was ambitious. He wanted to become an Eagle Scout. One of the merit badges caught his attention, the Atomic Energy Merit Badge. The requirements seemed simple: learn about nuclear fission, understand radiation safety, build a basic atomic model. But David wanted more. He didn't want to build a model. He wanted to build the real thing. David became obsessed with a specific concept: the breeder reactor. A breeder reactor is a type of nuclear reactor that creates more fissile material than it consumes. It's one of the most complex designs in nuclear engineering. Building one requires expertise, resources, and materials that are tightly controlled. David had none of these, but he was determined. David's first challenge was knowledge. He needed to understand nuclear physics, so he turned to the library. He read everything he could find: physics textbooks, nuclear engineering manuals, even classified documents he obtained through Freedom of Information requests. But reading wasn't enough. David needed guidance, so he began writing letters. David wrote to nuclear scientists, researchers, government officials, and he lied about who he was. He claimed to be a high school physics teacher, working on a lesson plan. And remarkably, people believed him. Scientists sent him technical documents, diagrams. Some even called him to discuss reactor designs. David was learning, and slowly a plan began to form. His next challenge was materials. Building a reactor required radioactive elements, and these aren't easy to find. But David discovered something. Radioactive materials are hiding in plain sight. Smoke detectors contain americium-241, a radioactive element used in ionization chambers. Camping lantern mantles contain thorium, another radioactive material. Clock faces used to contain radium. And David tracked down as many as he could find. David began collecting. He bought smoke detectors by the dozens, eventually over 100 of them. He ordered lantern mantles in bulk, claiming he was a camping supply store owner. He visited antique shops, searching for old clocks, old instruments, anything that might contain radioactive paint. And then came the extraction process. Inside his mother's shed, David set up his laboratory. It was crude, dangerous, and completely unsupervised. He dismantled smoke detectors one by one, carefully extracting the tiny americium sources inside. He processed lantern mantles, isolating the thorium through chemical reactions. He even attempted to enrich uranium, using techniques he'd read about in declassified documents. But David needed more than just radioactive materials. He needed neutrons. A breeder reactor works by bombarding non-fissile material with neutrons. This converts it into fissile material that can sustain a nuclear reaction. So David built what's called a neutron gun. He combined americium with beryllium. When alpha particles from americium strike beryllium, neutrons are released. It's a technique used in actual nuclear research, and David figured it out from library books. For months, David worked in secret. His parents rarely checked on him. They had no idea what was happening. Inside the shed, David assembled his reactor, a crude assembly of radioactive materials, aluminum foil, lead shielding. He positioned his neutron source, aimed at thorium blankets, and waited. And then something happened. Something David hadn't fully anticipated. His reactor began working. The neutron bombardment was creating new radioactive isotopes. The levels of radiation in the shed began to climb. David had a Geiger counter, a device that measures radiation, and it was going crazy. At first, David was excited. His experiment was succeeding beyond his wildest expectations. But then he realized something. He couldn't control it. The radiation levels kept climbing. His Geiger counter detected radiation 5 houses away. David began to panic. He had created something dangerous, and it was getting worse. On August 31st, 1994, David Hahn's world came crashing down. He was caught trying to steal a tire from a car, a minor crime. But when police searched his vehicle, they found something unusual. Toolboxes secured with padlocks, duct tape covering the seams, and a note that said, "Radioactive material inside." The police called the bomb squad. Who called the Department of Energy? Who called the EPA? When federal agents tested David's possessions, they discovered dangerous levels of radiation. And then David told them about the shed. EPA officials arrived at David's mother's house. They brought radiation detection equipment, and what they found shocked them. The shed registered over 1,000 times normal background radiation. It was a hazardous materials site. Nearby homes showed elevated readings. The entire neighborhood had been exposed. The EPA launched a full cleanup operation. They sealed off the property. Agents in hazmat suits carefully dismantled David's reactor. They filled dozens of barrels with contaminated materials. The shed itself, tools, soil, everything was transported to a facility in Utah, designated for low-level radioactive waste. The cleanup cost over $60,000 and took weeks to complete. Remarkably, David was never charged with a crime. There were no laws he had clearly broken. Possessing radioactive materials wasn't illegal. Building a reactor in your backyard wasn't illegal. The regulations simply didn't account for someone like David. David Hahn's story didn't end that day, but it should have been a warning. He joined the Navy, served on a nuclear submarine, but he was discharged after showing signs of paranoia and instability. He struggled with mental health, with substance abuse. In 2007, he was arrested again, this time for stealing smoke detectors. David Hahn died in 2016. He was 39 years old. The cause of death was ruled as alcohol poisoning. His story raises uncomfortable questions. How did a teenager with no formal training build a nuclear reactor? How many radioactive materials are accessible to anyone determined enough to find them? And most importantly, could this happen again? David Hahn's reactor never achieved true nuclear fission. It never sustained a chain reaction, but it came terrifyingly close, and it proved something. The line between scientific curiosity and catastrophe can be razor thin. This was the story of the Radioactive Boy Scout, a teenager who reached for the stars and nearly irradiated his neighborhood in the process. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, there's more where this came from. Subscribe to Veiled Science for more hidden stories from the dark side of science.